Welcome to a football show on Thursday here. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages on the 440 Sports Network. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean. I'm Braden Gall. Nick, good morning.
Hello. Sorry, I was sending out my convoluted people watch the show tweet, and now we're here. And now
Yeah,
we're talking. The show is happening,
and
because
people are
we told
watching.
people to watch the show, which is happening now.
USA, USA, USA. That's right. It is match day 3 for the USA men's national team. Even though the match tonight, they're so good that tonight doesn't even matter. Tonight doesn't even matter for the team. Been a while since I've been live. Hello, all, says QC. Good to see you guys. If you want to get involved in the comments, today's going to be a loose show. We're going to do PK and I on Monday. Spend some time after the Jeffrey Simmons extension talking through what the defense could look like from a depth chart standpoint and maybe what an expectation would look like. We're going to do the offense today. I do want to talk to you about Jeffrey Simmons and sort of what you think of the deal and what you think of the contract, what you think of his potential and this defense's potential. We'll start with that here on the show. But if you want to get involved, there is time today. So jump into the comments. You can ask questions. You can help steer the conversation. Make sure, of course, you support Sinkers Beverages. Make sure you support Nick at the Tennessean by signing up for good journalism. And, of course, there is we turned back on the Press Forward media survey. That got turned back on, so it's going to be linked in the show notes and on the YouTube page. So if you could please take 5 minutes, fill out the survey, Press Forward, midtn.news. That's Press Forward, midtn.news. Takes 5 minutes. It's anonymous. It does help this nonprofit organization help direct funds and resources to local news organizations in Middle Tennessee to help amplify and build a more successful and sturdy independent local media ecosystem. So check that out. So Sinkers Beverages, Tennessean.com, and the Press Forward survey would appreciate it. Also, last one here, notifications turned on the YouTube page. So please check it out that way. Let's go. Cam is going to flourish with the weapons we have this year, says Belvis Duffelfield. That's a great name, by the way. So we'll work through the offensive expectations and depth chart and project all that stuff here coming up in just a minute. However, Jeffrey Simmons, $105 million contract. PK and I talked about it on Monday, but I want to get your thoughts on this. Sort of a no-brainer for this team. They had to extend him. $100 million guaranteed is a lot. So I guess my first thought is sort of your just initial thoughts on the contract and the extension, but really in your brief time covering the team for a couple of years now, how would you articulate and describe Jeffrey Simmons' growth, and what do you think the next chapter looks like for him?
It's hard to imagine, to answer the last part of that question first, it's hard to imagine up, right? What he accomplished last year and what his season looked like last year felt like a peak, felt like a crowning, a coronation of how good he can be. And we've seen guys like Chris Jones improve at a later age in their career and sustain this. We've seen Aaron Donald be one of one. We've seen this, but it's not you don't have a season like that and then expect, okay, he's going to be better. But we also see what Jeffrey Simmons looks like, and we see the work ethic. And if you're asking where has he grown over the 4 or 5 years I've been on this beat, the part that's hardest to ignore is just the care and the attention and the effort he puts into making sure his body and his craft is tip top. I'm not going to say this with authority. I don't know this for certain, but it's hard not to imagine that seeing his early career with prime Derrick Henry can't have played a factor here of the way Derrick pays attention to his instrument. We've been blessed here with, I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day when the Predators got a second hockey Hall of Famer, a second full-time hockey Hall of Famer. I know they've had more than two, but two guys that are expressly associated.
Just erasing David Poile. Okay.
Players.
No, I know. Keep going.
But so I was thinking about this, of how the Titans have existed for 28 years, whatever it is, off the top of my head math. And other than Derrick, there had not been a obvious slam dunk associated with the franchise true blue Hall of Famer. And I was comparing that.
There are a bunch of Kevin Mawais.
Yeah. I was comparing that to other newer franchises, and the Panthers had Luke Kuechly and Julius Peppers, and I guess you could argue Cam Newton, probably not a Hall of Famer, but a player deeply associated with the franchise as an MVP that took him to a Super Bowl. And
huge profile. Yeah.
the Texans have had Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins and J.J. Watt and like true blue guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame associated with their franchise.
Yeah.
The Titans hadn't really had that as a newer franchise. They'd had, the Bruce Matthews and Earl Campbells that are associated more with the Oilers. And then they had guys who are local heroes. Eddie George, local hero, not going to make the Hall of Fame, you wouldn't imagine. And like,
I would put Eddie George in the Cam Newton category, though. Like,
potentially.
Got to a Super Bowl, big name, profile, means a lot to the community, very popular player. Yeah.
But all of that's to say, I was kind of thinking of this through the lens of Jeffrey Simmons and what's it going to take for him to end up more in the, for lack of a better comparison, Julius Peppers, Luke Kuechly class than in the Kevin Byard class of local hero who maybe doesn't have huge outreach outside of the market. And Byard obviously is cementing his legacy elsewhere, and that helps. But I don't know, what is up look like? What does better look like? We salivate over sacks, we salivate over pass rush, and if the Saleh system is going to use him more on passing downs and ask him to exert more on passing downs, and he can be a pure pass rush specialist from the interior. I don't know that we've ever seen him be that. And if he puts up numbers that's 12, 13 sacks next year and technically improves, like, yeah, that's when you start thinking of him in that class. But until then, it's kind of hard to fathom what better looks like, because that was about as good as I can imagine him being.
I don't think it has to be better, and I certainly didn't mean to ask, like, if I asked it that way, that's my fault. I think the next few years need to just look similar.
Sure.
To this past season, and as long as they look similar to this past season or some of his other good seasons, then I think it's totally. I mean, the re-signing is not even a debate. Like, it's not even a conversation. The money's worth it. He's worth it, etc. I just think that there has been a transformation with him where he has evolved. And whether it's maturity, whether it's leadership, whether it's physically, whatever it is, like now maybe it's schematically that's going to be the next step for his change. I still think he's going to be as good as he's always been. And I agree that it's interesting to put the historical sort of Hall of Fame, like who is it's hard to be the face of a franchise as a defensive interior tackle. Like, it just is.
It's happened maybe 3 times in NFL history.
Like
Joe Green, Warren Sapp, Aaron Donald.
Right. Like, it's so you have to be a larger than life personality and be an elite player, because all the Pat Williamses of the world just don't get the same kind of love or same kind of run. And I think he does here. I think people in Nashville and in Middle Tennessee who are Titans fans, they know how good he is.
Yeah.
And from a physical gift standpoint, Kevin, there's a good, Kevin Byard here, local hero, but not really Hall of Fame caliber. Kevin Byard's a freak. He's great. And he's not on the same freak level as Derrick Henry and Jeffrey Simmons. Like, they are. There's a reason they were 5-star #1 recruit in the nation coming out of high school, good, and then delivered on it in college, and then delivered on it in the draft, and then delivered on it in the NFL. There's just very few people that have like that much pedigree. Like, frankly, Peter Skoronski is doing that, actually. 5-star #1 player in the nation. I think my question is more like, I really enjoy his growth as a story, just because I like seeing people go through that stuff and then realize success. I like that just as a human. But I think it's more about when's the decline come from a business standpoint for the Titans. And what is he, 29? Like, I think he turns 29. I think he's got at least 3 of the 5 years at the highest level in the NFL still to come.
Yeah. Maybe
the 4th year he's 80% or 75%, and then by the 5th year maybe you're going, okay, we're only playing him half the time. I don't know. But I would bank on at least 3 more elite level, all pro-ish type of seasons from Jeffrey Simmons.
Yeah, if he stays healthy, there's no reason to think that he can't have an extended prime in the way Chris Jones did.
Yeah.
Like, that is totally reasonable. And Fletcher Cox is another guy, not to just keep naming Mississippi State tackles, but like, there are guys in recent years who have had extended primes at that position and continued to be dominant. And it certainly doesn't hurt Jeffrey Simmons that he's going to be on the field less this year. That will save him longer term. It certainly doesn't hurt Jeffrey Simmons that John Franklin Myers is on the roster now, and he has kind of a partner in crime rather than just kind of having to be running the pass rush by himself last year. No disrespect to Devondre Sweat as a run stopper, but he was not the difference maker in the pass game that maybe he was envisioned to potentially be. It's going to be a better setup for him this year. So maybe higher leverage, less effort is a good thing for him to extend that career. But long story short, he's really good, guys. Like it's a good thing the Titans have him.
Ed says, I guess that's Samari Roll, Javon Curse, Jeffrey Simmons, top 3 all-time Titan defenders in that order. I'm shocked that you have Samari Roll at number 1, by the way.
Yeah,
I do think
choice.
Yeah, Up is continuing a lot of the same, honestly, says Coach Wills. I agree. 10 says, you dare say Titans legend and Mayo connoisseur Will Levis won't be a Hall of Famer? Retrodox, Titans need bigger spotlights so Jeff can get recognized more. I think that's a fair
that's a fair shout. Like
a fair piece of analysis.
I was thinking about this the other day. The NFL Top 100, the bane of our all existences, started coming out this week, and I was trying to project where Jeffrey Simmons will rank among the top 100 players in the NFL on this year's list. And I was comparing it against Chris Jones had been the top defensive tackle each of the last 3 years. And I think his rankings were like 6th, 11th, and 12th, or maybe 6th, 10th, and 11th in those 3. Jeffrey Simmons isn't going to crack the top 15, right? Like just the fact that he plays on the Titans, he's going to be lower as the top defensive tackle, right?
It's funny, like the number in my head as you were kind of winding that question up is 18. I don't know why. But
I think 16. Very competent.
But I think he's kind of better than that. Like I think he is the best defensive tackle in the NFL, maybe. So, and I'm not prone to that kind of conversation around Titans very often.
No, I will leave a media member's name out of this. But if you guys want to guess and speculate in the comments, please do. I remember a conversation being had last year at training camp where we were discussing, is Jeffrey Simmons ranked higher among the NFL's best defensive tackles than Baker Mayfield is among the NFL's best quarterbacks? And 2 or 3 of us were like, what the hell are we talking? Yes, of course.
Oh, I remember. I think I was standing around.
And there was one media member who was adamant that Baker was higher among quarterbacks than Jeff was among defensive linemen. Just remember where we were at this time last year, that conversation was being had.
Is that Terry?
I'm not naming names, but Jeffrey Simmons was not in the NFL Top 100 last year. Jeffrey Simmons was not coming off of a Pro Bowl or All-Pro season. Stupid. Jeffrey Simmons, at this time last year, there was question about, is he on his way down? And there was all this speculation about why isn't he around the team? There was all this speculation. It was not Stillman.
No, it is a very Stillman. It is the way. It is a very Stillman way to start a conversation where you just walk up to you at training camp and be like, Braden, I think Baker Mayfield's a better quarterback than Jeffrey Simmons as a defensive tackle. What do you think? Like, that's how he would start a conversation. Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
But I bring this up not to dunk on the reporter and more to be like, remember this time last year we were talking about, oh, Jeff slimmed down. Oh, Jeff's not at practice. Why isn't Jeff with the team? He's coming off his worst season as a full-time pro. What's happening? Where is he? Is he on the way down? Is he actually this team's best player anymore? And then he came out and had the best season any Titans interior defensive lineman, and arguably any Titans defender has ever had. I would still argue that 08 Cortland Finnegan might be the best single season by a Titans defender.
Bayard's second season.
Bayard's 2017 was really good.
8 interceptions.
Curse's rookie year in 99. Cortland in 08, and the great one of the best Keith Bullock seasons. I can't remember if it's 04 or 05.
Pac-Man Jones. No.
Pac-Man in 06. There were some good ones, but.
So let's get some comments here. Not to mention the last 2 off seasons, Jeff has made an effort to be more front facing. I agree with that, and that Jeff survived the wrath of PK and now has the seal of approval. If Cam turns out to be the guy, how does Jeff's contract line up with Cam needs to be paid? Like Cam will have 5 years, and I think PK's pointed this out. The only 3 players technically under contract in that 5th year are Cam Ward, Carnell Tate, and Jeffrey Simmons, I think in 2030, technically right now. So with those options. Kevin Byard's physical skill set was never freak. Though college or NFL, it's always been between the ears. He's a Tom Brady at safety. I think that's a fairly good comparison. He's also a very good athlete. Let's be clear. Let's be clear on that. But there is another tier, right? There's a Troy Polamalu, Ronnie Lott. Like there's another tier of like elite athleticism at that position.
If you guys have never seen the video, I'll just plug a 20-year-old NFL Films video. Go find the video of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady breaking down the tape of Ed Reed tricking Peyton Manning.
I don't know why I didn't say Ed Reed first. I don't know why I didn't say him.
Ed Reed's the best football player I've ever seen. I will just say that, without hyperbole, best football player I've ever seen. There's a video of him baiting Peyton Manning into throwing a bad pass, and just Brady and Belichick just being like, Peyton has never thrown a bad pass in his life. How does one bait him in? It's incredible. It's just Ed Reed.
Now that we're just down this random conversation, like Sean Taylor, RIP, might be the freakiest athlete to ever play safety from a size standpoint. Here's an interesting question. I think this is actually incorrect here. As KDJ2XX says, I think lack of eyes from a national perspective will hurt Simmons' Hall of Fame candidacy. I actually disagree with that. I think the beauty of the Hall of Fame conversation is that it's 49 super in the weeds experts. And one of them happens to be the guy that we just mentioned in the comments has won him over, right? Paul has been won over by Jeffrey Simmons. So I think those 49 voters know what's up. And I think he needs 3 more great seasons, and he could be a Hall of Famer.
He is currently not on a Hall of Fame path, but he is 1 or 2 years away from the argument. The problem that Jeffrey Simmons is always going to face is that in his draft class alone, there are arguments about where he ranks among defensive tackles. That was the same year Quinnen Williams came out. That was the same year Christian Wilkins came out. That was the same year Dexter Lawrence came out. That was the same year. I think there was one more that went in the first round. Maybe Ed Oliver was that year. And Ed Oliver's not in the same class as these guys we're talking about, but like,
pretty good though.
There is a generation of defensive tackles that I tend to think Jeff has the best resume of any of them, but Dexter Lawrence playing in New York can't hurt that.
That's a bummer, but like I think that's more fan conversation and like the things that happen around the voting. When you actually get into the room and the way those 49 experts do this, I think nobody slips through the cracks because they play for a bad team, which I think is hopefully like a good thing. Now I want to Sinkers Beverages, everybody. So if you're watching the USA match tonight, make sure you go pick out from their craft beer, award-winning craft beer fridge, retail fridge. They have tons of beer in there, but go get you some East Nashville Beer Works. So if you want to go watch the match there, you can. They also have Tennessee Brew Works. You can go watch the match there. Also, they got Yazoo Brewing Company, the OG craft beer, all available in their fridge. Lots of different types of beer from those folks. And you can get all of that at Sinkers Beverages. So if you're stocking up tonight for the match or for the weekend of action on the World Cup stage, which is now wrapping up the group stage, which means things are getting real intense, you're going to need a couple of bevies. Make sure you swing by Sinkers Beverages for that. I do want to kind of quickly meander through your kind of face conversation of the team, because I think it's really interesting how you framed up the Carolina Panthers and the Texans. And I think there's more B+ level, and that's not B+ in terms of talent and production. It's B+ in terms of like
Hall of Fame resume
Q rating. Yeah. Like Chris Johnson, Javon Curse. I don't think you mentioned either of those two names. Those are two that I would put in the top tier of like big brand name Titans, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's bigger than Derrick Henry, but some of that is because of technology and how everybody's information is now in everybody's face all the time. So I think there's more there.
There is. And like I conveniently didn't mention Jacksonville, another newer franchise that doesn't even have one. I would argue that
like
there's
Taylor Lewan. Is he in the group? Brad Hopkins, is he in the group? Like,
I think that's a little bit too Nashville almost. Okay. I would argue that those guys had, like Taylor Lewan, when he signed his massive contract, obviously was a big name in the NFL, but I don't think he was ever like considered the best left tackle in the NFL. Okay. And Brad Hopkins might have been for a very brief period, but I don't think he was never in the caliber of Jonathan Ogden and Orlando Pace. And he was a victim of this era.
And to be clear, like I'm not suggesting that this is a Hall of Fame conversation. I'm sort of just moving the needle a little bit, moving the goalpost a little bit, and thinking through when an outside fan base, if you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys or the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you watch a lot of NFL football, and you think, and you've watched football for the last 30 years, and you say, give me the name association, right? Word association. Give me the first 6 or 8 names that come to mind with the Tennessee Titans. And I'd be fascinated to know what those names are from a fan base in Kansas City, Pittsburgh, wherever. because I think it's Eddie and McNair. I think Javon Curse is in there. I think Chris Johnson's in there. I think Derrick Henry's in there. I think Jeffrey Simmons will get in there.
Yeah.
Other ones weren't there. I mean, AJ Brown wasn't here long enough, I don't think.
No, like, correct me in the comments if I'm missing a team, but the 4 newest quote unquote franchises that I can think of would be Panthers, Jaguars, Titans, and Texans. If I'm missing somebody, please remind me. But if you're playing the like top 5 game,
do the Ravens not count?
Oh, you can count the Ravens, and the Ravens are going to kick everybody's butt on this game. The Ravens, if you say who are the 5 most notable Ravens, and you're giving them Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Lamar Jackson, Orlando Pace, Jonathan Ogden, and
I would go.
I
think I would go Lewis, Reed above everybody else, and then I would go. The first one that comes to, I think like Jamal Lewis comes to mind.
If Lamar Jackson's not in your top 3, you're doing it wrong. Because it's a 2-time MVP.
Yeah. Lamar Jackson, Terrell Suggs, and Ogden.
Yeah, that's 5 Hall of Famers.
That's 5. Yeah.
That's 5 Hall of Famers. That's easy.
Lamar Jackson's a Hall of Famer.
Lamar Jackson is the 2nd best quarterback of his generation.
Okay, we're gonna talk about McNair. You guys just chill out because you're all wrong. He's not a Hall of Famer. Continue.
But so if that's your top 5 in Baltimore.
Okay.
Carolina, you are getting some combination of Luke Kuechly, Julius Peppers, Steve Smith, Cam Newton, and Greg Olsen.
Jake Delhomme.
I would imagine Olsen. I might be forgetting somebody. There was a brief period where Josh Norman's Q rating was immense, but I don't think he sustained it long enough.
That's like an AJ Brown.
Yeah, that's a very, very brief period. So whether you want to pick Greg Olsen or like Jonathan Stewart or like whoever your number 5 is, some skill player that was famous.
I think Olsen's up there probably.
Houston,
It trails off quickly though.
That's 3 Hall of Famers, and then Cam Newton is 4. Like that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Houston, you are getting J.J. Watt, Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Stroud, and Clowney.
Not Clowney.
I'm just trying.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who else you would put in there.
They're going to have some guys that if they play for another 6 or 7, like if Derek Stingley and Will Anderson and these guys keep playing, it's going to be real salty.
Yeah, Will Anderson's going to be on that list.
They won so many divisions with no names you can mention on offense. outside of Hopkins and Johnson. Mario Williams? Yeah.
Mario Williams, that's a good pick. He belongs in the top 5.
I could be on that. That one.
He belongs in there. And then Jacksonville, Tony Baselli.
Baselli's the Mark Brunell, Keenan McCardell, Fred Taylor. Who was the other receiver that I'm drawing a blank on? Jimmy Smith. Like those guys are. Was a really good chunk of time.
I will say Baselli, Jimmy Smith, Fred Taylor, Jalen Ramsey. Like the Jags.
Yeah.
The Jags certainly don't. Nobody in the Jags top 5 would have cracked the Ravens top 5 or the Panthers top 5. Maybe might have cracked the Texans top 5. And so if you're comparing that against the Titans, who we're playing this from the not beloved by Titans fans scale, but just like ranking of how close they would be to being Hall of Fame locks or how close they'd be to being considered inner circle NFL greats. It's Derrick Henry, followed by a pretty significant drop-off, I would say.
I agree. And I think Simmons might actually be number 2 eventually.
Simmons might get there. Right now, I would say McNair is a little bit ahead at number 2, Simmons at 3, and then Javon Curse and
here's what's
Byard?
Crazy. Is Kevin Byard on track to have a Hall of Fame career?
He could be.
I don't think it's that far off to say that he could be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and for Bustin asking about Kevin Mawai, like I don't think anybody associates Kevin Mawai as a type.
No.
Like end of the day, he is thought of for his time with the Jets.
Oh, Maurice Jones-Drew for Jacksonville. That's a good one.
Another short but famous one.
Yeah. Mario Williams. Nick might have seen. This is a totally random question. Nick, you might have seen my wife and son at the Cardinal Tate meet and greet.
I saw a lot of people. To anyone who came up and introduced themselves to me yesterday at the Cardinal meet and greet, really good to meet you. And if you keep seeing me in public, anybody who sees me in public, say hi. I like when people say hi to me.
So I did not intend. We're going to talk about the depth chart, but now we're here talking Steve McNair Hall of Fame candidacy, and I think his career is so unique that it's almost hard to like compare it to other players. Generally speaking, this is what I said on the Pred show yesterday, and I stand by this for baseball, football, whatever. I think you have to be among the best players at your position in your era to be a Hall of Famer. If we say that you are a top 3 quarterback while you were the starting quarterback in the NFL, you're a Hall of Famer, in kind of my opinion, unless it's like the worst era of quarterback play in the history of the league, which it wasn't at that time because there was a lot of Hall of Famers at the time. That's kind of the problem with McNair. The 3 years waiting really eats into his sort of statistical production. His value isn't easily quantifiable on an internet webpage, right? Like you look at these stats on Pro Football Reference, and you're like, this isn't comparable to the guys who are going in first ballot. You know what I'm saying? And that's not fair because that devalues what he brought to the team to some degree. I think you kind of know it when you see it also. And I don't think Steve McNair is a Hall of Famer.
The simple reality here is that there are already too many quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame. The bar for getting into the Hall of Fame as a quarterback is so much lower than the bar for just about every other position. At one point, and I don't know if this is still true, but at one point in the recent past, there were 5 times as many quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame as there were offensive linemen. And as we all know, on a given football play, there are 5 times as many offensive linemen on the field as there are quarterbacks. That gives it a 25x disparity, if you're thinking logically. I have a hard time, like, we're sitting here and we're entering a generation where we have to talk about guys like Ben Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning and their Hall of Fame candidacies. And Eli's not made it into the Hall of Fame on his first 2 ballots. And we're going to have to talk about other guys, Matt Ryan and Matthew Stafford and Russell Wilson, and all of these conversations of guys who are top tier statistical profiles, who were consistent winners year after year, who in the case of Eli won multiple Super Bowls, in the case of Big Ben won multiple Super Bowls, in the case of Phillip Rivers was a guarantee for 10 to 12 wins every year. Longer primes than Steve McNair had, more significant primes from a general name recognition and fame in the league. And look, for as great as Steve McNair was, this is not a knock on him. This is not a knock on Titans fandom. But the weakest vestige, or the last vestige of people who just desperately want their guy in, is the argument of, well, name another person who meant more to their team. Because if you're ever using that argument, what you are communicating to me is that you only watch your team. And that's good. That's reasonable. You should watch your team more than everybody else. It's not your job to watch all of the other teams. It's the voters' jobs to watch all of the other teams. And I would get in this conversation with when I was a Heisman Trophy voter for a long time. And did you ever have a Heisman vote? Do you still vote?
Yeah, I'm on 9 years now, I think.
Okay.
10 years, something like that.
I
did not. I did. Ironically, my first year was when Derrick Henry won it, and I did not vote for Derrick Henry.
I remember getting
I voted for Christian McCaffrey.
It was a fair year, a fair vote that year. I remember getting in a lot of debates with people when I was in Oxford about like, oh, player A or SEC player A clearly meant the most to their team. And then I do a side-by-side of this quarterback versus a quarterback from the ACC of like, well, here's how weak his team was. Here's how many injuries his team had. Here's how much rushing he had to do as a quarterback. There are players everywhere that are doing what your player's doing. You're just the most aware of what your player's doing. And so Steve McNair was immensely valuable to those Titans teams. And those Titans teams probably would not have succeeded for as long as they did without Steve McNair. But the fact of the matter is, if you were a Chargers fan, you would be talking about Phillip Rivers that way. If you were an Eagles fan, you would be talking about Donovan McNabb this way. There were quarterbacks of that era who simply were in the same tier, but they're more fondly remembered in their market. And that's not a bad thing.
And honestly, that 04 class is kind of like, I would draw the line and not include them because Retro says, and at first I thought Retro was like, please he says, name 3 quarterbacks during his time that were better to help people cope. And at first, when I saw that comment, I thought, oh, Retro's arguing that McNair was clearly one of the best 3. And then I read it again, and I'm like, Steve Berline, Rich Gannon, and Dante Culpepper all led the NFL in passing, and none of those 3 were better than Steve McNair. That does not include the actual first ballot Hall of Famers who were dominating at that time. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, namely.
Yeah,
and that's before you get to the 04 class, which is the Manning, Rivers, and Roethlisberger of it all. Yeah. So Drew Brees also came around that time. Like that is when elite level quarterback play like shot off the charts.
I would say that Kurt Warner's another one who's in the Hall of Fame from that era that you haven't mentioned. I would say that the line with McNair that you have to compare it to is Donovan McNabb.
McNabb. There's another one.
Donovan McNabb went to 4 straight NFC Championship games, and Donovan McNabb was incredibly successful and played a similar brand, not the same brand, obviously, but a similar brand to McNair, and neither of them are in, and I think that's probably reasonable. I don't know if I would have argued for Kurt Warner to make the Hall of Fame, and he's in. Like, it's very, very tricky when you talk about just the glut of quarterbacks that have made it. They're so prominent. They're so famous.
McNabb is top 30 all time in passing yards. I didn't realize he had over almost 40,000 yards passing. So McNair's, unfortunately, like, again, this is what I started with, is that McNair's numbers, his value, and his 3 years on the bench just affect him from a judgment standpoint. Here's the other thing nobody wants to say out loud, and I don't know if this is controversial or not. I don't mean it that way. I think the way his life ended also amplifies his place in our mind because of how tragic it was. And I don't know if that actually adds to the nostalgia that people feel. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So also there was the back and forth with Titans fans at the beginning of his career. Like, it wasn't like he was super beloved by Titans fans right out of the box. Like, it wasn't like Cam, where everyone's like obsessed with Cam the second he gets drafted. So
as for Eddie George, I think the argument is actually a lot shorter, a lot simpler. At running back, if you are not
3.9 yards a carry,
if you are not obviously one of the 3 best backs of your era, you're not gonna make the Hall of Fame. And Eddie George was playing at a time when Marshall Faulk was winning MVPs, and when Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson were coming around, and you had Priest Holmes, and you had Jamal Lewis, and like, there were a lot of players of Eddie George's caliber, is my point. He wasn't clearly in the top 3.
Yeah, and I don't know if, like, is Sean Alexander in the Hall of Fame? I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he should be a Hall of Famer. Yeah.
And there are a lot of guys that were still holding on at the beginning of Eddie George's career, Barry Sanders and Emmett Smith and that sort of thing. There were just
Dorsey Levens,
Garrison Hurst.
Yeah, now we're talking.
We're naming some dudes on a football show.
Let's do it.
But yeah, it's very hard to make the argument that he was clearly and obviously. Did I mention Jerome Bettis? I think I did. But
back when Alexi Lawless was relevant, all these names we're mentioning.
Yeah, they're
okay.
Some guys.
Sinkers Beverages, Tennessean.com. Fill out the press forward survey. Let's look at the offense, let's look at the depth chart here and kind of project. I know you wrote this, Tennessean.com. If you want to follow along, you projected the 53-man roster. So we'll kind of work through this. I think this is a 3-quarterback team unless Will Levis gets traded. It is very clear that Cam Ward and Mitch Trubisky are the only 2 players that should be taking snaps for this organization this year. But the goal is to make Will Levis as valuable as possible. And I think he's too good to cut him. So I think he's on the team. I think it's a 3-quarterback team, even though you rarely have 3 quarterbacks actually active on game day. So
yeah, I agree.
Any discussion about the quarterback room?
The one thing I will say is I think it's a 3-quarterback team, even if they trade Levis, because I do think that they will find a way to find a young developmental quarterback to sneak either onto the practice squad or onto the 53 at some point. I don't think Hendon Hooker is that guy, but eventually I would not be surprised if there is a young developmental option just so the coaches have somebody to play with. We will see. I don't know who.
Brendan Sorsby, question mark?
I think that ship has sailed.
So I've got Ward, Trubisky, and Levis on the team right now because I think Levis is clearly one of your 53 best players.
I agree.
There's no question about that, in my opinion. Running back is interesting because I think Pollard and Spears are clear-cut going to get most of the ball. I think Nick Singleton's on the team because of where they drafted him and what he does. Khalil Mullings, Julius Chestnut, how many are they going to keep, in your opinion?
Hold on. Let me let this screaming cat leave the room.
Yeah. What's up with the cat?
She's just mad the door's shut.
I'm gonna channel my inner Nick
way.
Suss here, and I think Tajay Spears has a really big role in this team. I'm anti PK on this take. I think PK is down on Spears too much so, and I've been trying to bring him up to our level where I think Spears is going to have like 150 touches. Like as long as he's healthy, I think this is a Pollard, Spears, and then like in case of emergency, you go to Nick Singleton or Khalil Mullings or whoever else is in there. Julius Chestnut's still just hanging on though, man. He's still always around and doing good stuff and a good special teamer. I think Mullings is going to really develop into a really good special teamer if he's not already. So I think that's probably the reason he might make the team. So I don't know how many running backs you think they keep.
If Khalil Mullings can't be Julius Chestnut, then obviously you can keep Chestnut. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would be a little bit surprised if they didn't cash in for a newer model at this point of have him be the
new
bigger
Chestnut
back and the new Chestnut and the special teams maven and all that stuff. It's just, obviously there's nothing against a GM giving up on a draft pick 2 years in. We've seen it happen several times in recent years, but I still don't necessarily get the vibe that would happen. I can't remember who I had. I think I had just 4 backs on my 53.
You had 4.
And I think Mullings edged out Chestnut.
You had Mullings, yep.
But
Okay, it's a good. Coach B says, "Am I the only person who watches the Titans and realizes that Tony Pollard is not a starting running back? He was a top 12 running back in the NFL last year."
Yeah, no, I mean, Coach B, they can't start Eddie George anymore. So, no, I'm not picking on you. I'm saying this in the literal sense of like nobody touches the ball 400 times a season anymore. Yeah. Tony Pollard has always been best if he's touching the ball 200, 250 times a season. Like you don't want to overload him. He's a starting running back as the number 1 in a 2-man rotation. He's not the starting running back as the number 1 where your number 2 is a clear backup. Yeah, so if Tajay Spears can play 17 games, which is always going to be the big question about Tajay, I have no problem with Tony Pollard being 1A. But if he's 1 and Tajay Spears is 2, I kind of do agree that that's not what Tony Pollard is built for.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. He was 13th in the NFL in carries. Tony Pollard was 13th in the NFL in rushing yards last year. I think he is an middle of the road number RB1 in the NFL. Like he's not in the tier of like top 8 to 10 guys that are like all stars that demand the ball more, but he's absolutely one of the better starting running backs. I think he is better when he is spelled with Spears, and I think that's what's going to make this interesting. So 7 wide receivers. This is fun. Obviously, Carnell Tate, Wan'Dale Robinson, Calvin Ridley, Alec Iomanner, and Chim DK. Those 5 are locks to be on the team, obviously. And I would argue that 1 through 5, that's the best 5-man receiving core that maybe this organization has ever had. 1 through 5. I know it's a little hyperbolic, but you get my point. We've debated this on the sidelines that it's sort of like 3 or 4 guys for like 1 or 2 spots. Bryce Oliver, KJ Osborne, Xavier Restrepo, and maybe Tyron Montgomery are all in that mix. KJ Osborne is the most experienced of that group, so I think he has the lead there. And I think Xavier Restrepo had a great offseason, and I think the coaching staff just really likes him, and he's a backup for the slot like we talked about. So you have 7, and you have Osborne and Restrepo on there.
I will be honest and say that was a projected 53 with relation to what we saw from OTAs and minicamp. It is less a projected 53 with relation to how this team is actually going to be shaped and be good. There's very little value to KJ Osborne being on the roster as your number 6 receiver because you're not going to use your number 6 wide receiver. So if you keep a number 6 receiver primarily because of his ability to rotate in the receiving core, it's a bit of a wasted spot. Double can be said at number 7 if neither of these guys are like major special teams assets. Is it more valuable to the shape of having 48 active players on game day to keep both Khalil Mullings and Julius Chestnut and have both of them on special teams than it is to keep Restrepo and Osborne and have them play on special teams? The surplus value is larger. I would say that. So when I say they're keeping 7 receivers, that is more of a reward for these guys having really good OTAs, having really good mini camps than it is me necessarily saying this is what's going to make the team best on game day. I think there is a lot of value in keeping Bryce Oliver as your number 6 receiver because you trust him on special teams. He's got to stay healthy too. That is obviously going to go without saying for a lot of these guys who missed times last year. Khalil Mullins missed a lot of time last year. If there is an argument for keeping a number 6 receiver, the 2 best options are going to be guy who can contribute on special teams and guy who is developmental. And so those definitely play more in the hands of Bryce Oliver and Tyron Montgomery than they do in the hands of Osborne and Restrepo. But if you're asking who were the 6th and 7th best wide receivers,
that's fair.
It's Osborne and it's Restrepo. So it's a complicated conversation before we even get to how many inside linebackers are you keeping, how many safeties are you keeping, other people that fill out your special teams units. I would be a little bit surprised if they kept 7. But if you're asking who are the 53 best players on the team right now, I think 7 of them are wide receivers.
I think it's 4 guys for 1 spot, probably. Once we get to training camp and we kind of know who those 4 are, and we'll see what happens. But Oliver is a very good special teams player, and I agree. I thought Osborne is the most dependable kind of wide receiver of the group, and then Restrepo is the one who had the best camp or the best OTAs and mini camp. So we'll see. Gunnar Helm, Daniel Bellinger, and Jaron Kanik are your 3 tight ends. All 3 who do very different things, which I think is a really cool, like, it's finally good to see. You know, you don't want the tight end room with like 3 guys who are all identical, which I feel like we've had that before for the Titans team. And now we have a seam stretcher. We have a move tight end who can be a H-back or a fullback. And you've got your big burly blocker who also can be used in passing situations. So I think 12 personnel is coming back, of course, in the NFL, obviously. But this is a good group. I don't think you need a 4th one. There's a bunch of guys that are all kind of the same. You know, Granson and DMR and all these other guys. They're all kind of the same. Yeah.
I will add this as one little note for just something I've been working on for the dead period of the season, off season. I want to say between Chigakonkwo, Gunnar Helm, and David Martin Robinson, Titans tight ends were targeted upwards of 140 times last year. There were a lot of passes thrown to tight ends. Might have been 120. It was a large number. In 2023 and 2024, Brian Daboll's Giants teams targeted their tight ends about 80 to 85 times per season. There is a pretty significant drop off in tight end target share. And obviously, one of those seasons, the Giants didn't have Darren Waller, and it totally affected what they were able to do, and they didn't have like a true number 1 tight end and whatever you can say. But even with Waller, I think Waller was being targeted 70, 75 times. And
Chig had 79 targets. Gunnar Helm, just to clean it up, Gunnar Helm had 55 targets. Chig had 79 targets. So you're right there. You're already at whatever that is, 134. And Martin Robinson had 6, so 140 targets on the nose.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is that Gunnar Helm did tell us in our conversation with him, like, hey, like, tight ends are used really creatively in Brian Daboll's system. So it's not that they're used a lot; it's that they're used in different roles, right?
But all of this was me building up to saying, I would not be shocked if the projections that you are seeing about Gunnar Helm's total number of targets are a little bit overstated. I think that him and Daniel Bellinger are going to be used a lot, and I think there are going to be a fair number of 2 tight end sets mixed in, and I think that that Daboll is going to be creative in how he deploys his tight ends. But the reason why I'm not projecting a whole ton of tight end depth, even though I'm expecting there to be some 2 tight end sets used, I still just don't know if there's going to be enough of the pie to be sliced off to get a receiving first tight end like David Martin Robinson.
No. I think Helm is going to be at like 60, which is a slight improvement from last year, but still less than Chig, right? Still significantly less than Chig. I would go like 60 targets for Helm, 25 for Bellinger, and like 10 for Kanik, 15 for Kanik. That puts him at about 90 to 100 targets. I think that's still significantly less than what they did last year. So I tend to agree. All right, at tackle, we've got Dan Moore, J.C. Latham, and Austin Deculus. That's it? They're going to have 3 tackles?
The Titans have a real problem with how many interior offensive linemen they seem to need to keep.
Uh-huh.
You are not going to cut Skoronski, obviously. You are not going to cut Schlotman or Volson as your veterans. And then you have 3 guards that you've drafted in the last 2 years. Guards or centers between Slater, Coogan, and Carmona.
Borgonzi's drafted all three of them.
You are guaranteeing it feels like you would say you are guaranteeing 6 interior offensive linemen.
Move Skoronski to tackle? ?
If you have the space to keep a 4th tackle, Ryan Hayes has value. You can sneak Ryan Hayes onto your practice squad. Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon,
he might not.
You might be able to. You might not be able to. It's interesting. I don't think I ever saw Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon playing on the left side in OTAs this year. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I only remember seeing him deployed on the right side. And that does make me question if they see him as a swing tackle. That could purely just be where the numbers line up.
Okay.
But I do not remember seeing him swing.
I don't think he did that. I don't remember seeing him on the left either, now that I think about it. But they do have a tackle problem if one of them gets hurt.
Yeah.
Like they have a corner problem. They have a depth problem at tackle and corner.
This is not to exonerate anything. Most NFL teams don't have 2 good starting tackles.
Yeah, that's true.
So very few NFL teams have 3 starting caliber tackles. It's a problem. That's not making it not a problem. But guys, let's remember that for as good as we thought Oli Udoh was as a swing tackle last year, he still allowed like 20 quarterback pressures or something like that as a reserve. Like, it's hard to be a number 3 tackle in the NFL.
Do we think there's going to be much pre-snap motion in this offense? I think more than last year, but less than Kyle Shanahan.
That's fair. I don't have much of an answer, so I'm going to leave that to be the answer.
Yeah, that's how I would frame that. I think so. There's your projected. So when you look at this group of players and we project this offense, what I think could happen with the defense. I don't know if they're going to be specifically great at like man-to-man coverage or like a huge sack team. The Niners, for example, under Saleh last year, one of the worst teams through some injuries and other things. I think they were the last place team in pressures and sacks last year. I still think that defense can be between 12 and 18 in the NFL. I think the defense getting to 16, 17, 18 in the NFL, I think wins you 3 to 4 more games if your defense is that good. And even if the offense just takes marginal steps forward, what I think happens is that the defense then creates opportunity for victory. I don't think it's that the offense is driving wins by outscoring people. I think the offense is going to be improved with this group of skill players around Cam Ward. I think Cam is improved, but I think that goes from, what do they average, like 21 points a game last year or something like that?
Somewhere thereabouts.
Like they get to 24 points a game, and I don't think they're going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. If they could get to 21st in the NFL, 22nd in the NFL, what I think happens is the defense complementing that slight increase in quality on offense, the defense has a chance to take a much bigger step forward. And if that defense takes the step forward, that's where I think they go from 3 wins to 7 or 8 wins. I think marginal improvement from this group of offense, a bigger improvement from the defense, and that combination then allows you to win a few more games.
Yeah, and this is bordering on some geek corner speculation. So sorry if you listen for 48 minutes and don't want to hear a bunch of numbers.
Speculative geek corner.
But so like I looked at this number the other day when I was writing on something. I'm curious what your guess is. We spent a lot of time at this time last year saying, okay, between Dan Moore and JC Latham, the Titans tackles are finally good enough. And at what point does good enough become good enough? Between the games they played last year, and we know JC missed 5 or 6 games, how many pressures per game would you guess that Dan Moore and JC Latham surrendered?
Well,
sacks,
what's league
hurries, that's what we're getting at here. So I'm just curious what your guess for baseline is.
Pressures includes sacks, hurries, hits, or just sacks and hurries?
Sacks, hurries, and hurries.
Well, it's just the 2 tackles, not the entire offensive line.
Just the 2 tackles. How many pressures per game?
2?
Yeah, it was 2.7 between the 2 of them. Pressures per game. 25 of the 50 offensive tackles that played the most snaps last season allowed an average of 2 or more pressures per game.
And this 2.7 was the combined total of Latham?
So half of all starting tackles, if we're saying the top 50 are roughly your starters, half of all of them allowed more than 2 pressures per game. The aggregate of the Titans tackles, and again, JC didn't play in 5 or 6 games, and Dan Moore missed 1 game. So we're basing it off of a baseline of however many games they played. But they allowed about 2.7 pressures per game. I would say that probably fits into the realm of good enough. They did what we said they would do. Of the Titans tackle play needs to merely go from horrific to average for us to say good job. And it went from horrific to roughly average. And the Titans offense didn't get better. And there wasn't one simple fix. And I'm bringing this up to just like set the stage of the big question for the Titans as we navigate the 2026 season as media, as podcasters, as fans watching these media and podcasts. The question that will define this season is, at what point does good enough become good enough? Because I would argue that if you extrapolate what we just talked about at offensive tackle to almost every other position on the field, the Titans have probably made baseline strides to be good enough to be average at nearly every position group. There are some places where you can quibble. Are they good enough to be average on the interior offensive line? As an aggregate, probably not. Are they good enough to be average at pass rush?
Corner?
Corner as starters, maybe. Corner as depth, no. There are places we can quibble. But if we spent all this time last year, and I know I was one of the people who was leading this conversation, if we spent all of this time last year saying, all you have to do at tackle was improve from horrific to good enough, I think the Titans have improved from horrific to good enough in almost every area. So does a collection of good enough make your team good enough? Or at what point do you need something to be better than good enough? We spent the first half hour of this show talking about the class of player, the caliber of player that is J.J. Watt, that is Ed Reed, that is Julius Peppers. These players that are just one of one for their generation. Unbelievable, game-changing talents. How many of those do you need for good enough to become good enough? Versus how good enough do you have to be everywhere without having a true whole is good enough? That's kind of the transition period the Titans are in right now. Because we've talked about being deeper. We talked a lot last week about players 10 through 40 or players 15 through 40 are probably a lot better on this Titans team than they were a year or two ago. Are players 1 through 10 getting better at the same rate that players 15 through 40 are getting better? I don't necessarily know I have the evidence to say yes to that yet. But the baseline's up.
Yeah.
So when does good enough become good enough? That's going to be the overarching question as we head into these summer months and head into the camp.
Isn't the next step like, when is good enough not good enough? Like
Yes.
that's what I find interesting is, like, I think that fans are at certain positions are ready for it, that good enough to that we're tired of that. But then KD comes in and goes, I'm so thirsty for roughly average football games to watch, which I do think is the goal. I think if you get to 8 and 9 this year, that is a huge step forward. That is progress. And that means you are largely competitive on every Sunday.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the goal. I said that on Monday. Coach B says that JC, Cam, Tate, and Peter Skoronski must be top 10 at their position. Those are the last 4 first-round picks, of course. I'd
agree on 3 of those. I don't necessarily think that Cam needs to be top 10 at his position. I think Cam,
I think Peter is already. I think you better don't hold your breath on the other 3 to be top 10 at their position. Cam Ward is not a top 10 quarterback in this league. I don't think he is until some guys retire.
But even if
Tate, I don't think Carnell Tate is going to be a top 10 number 1, but you don't have to be. I think JC needs to be close to realize his potential.
Yeah, and I don't know if Coach B, I don't know if you're talking about this as 2026 or just at the peak of their career. They must be top 10 at their positions. Yeah. In order for the Titans to actually become contenders under this era, yes, Peter and JC need to be top 10 at their positions. Arguably, Tate needs to be top 10 at his position. You use the number 4 pick on him. There are a lot of teams that can contend without a true top 10 quarterback because all of the other guys around them. Now, if you could only pick one of them to be top 5 at their position, you pick Cam.
You want the quarterback.
That's not a question.
Yeah.
But if you're saying, would you rather have JC, Tate, and Peter all be top 10 at their position and Cam be average? Or would you rather Cam be top 10 and those guys be average? I would rather have 3 top 10 offensive players around an average quarterback than a bunch of average first-round picks around a top 10 quarterback. The number 1 overall pick must be a top 10 pick.
I'm sitting here going
let's make a list of all of the number 1 quarterbacks that have gone in recent years and whether they are top 10.
I mean, Baker Mayfield's not, but I think he's good enough to win you a Super Bowl. So
yeah, like Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield and
Trevor
Lawrence even. I don't think I would put Trevor Lawrence in the top 10, and the Jaguars won 13 games last year.
And what you're saying, Coach B, is like a number 1 overall pick must be a top 10 player at his position. I think in theory, to justify the pick, yes. In that particular draft class and at that position, if Cam Ward is 16th in the NFL, he might have been worth it in that particular draft class at that position. Is that what you want? Probably not. That's not the goal. You want to get a franchise-defining, revolutionary player, but that wasn't available for them. Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, like that wasn't available to them. It's just unfortunate that they had the number 1 pick at that time.
You can't do what the Celtics did in 1978 or whatever and just draft Larry Bird before he was eligible and break the rules. Like the rules are written in a different way now. You can't do that.
We're gonna take Arch Manning. Anyway, I think the offense will be, I'm going to say like 15 to 20% better. I think the defense has a chance to be 30 to 35% better. And I think that means the team could win 4 more games, maybe 5. And I think that's kind of where I'm at based on OTAs, based on camp, based on projecting the depth chart, based on progress and development and growth. They are more talented. They are better at almost every position group. I trust the coaching staff more. If Cam Ward develops, then, I think they've got a chance to be an improved team. And I think that's the right step for 2026. So
that's fair.
There you go.
I was going to say I'm a little less bullish on the maybe winning 5 more games. I might say 3, but
I'm not gambling on 8 wins. I'll take the under on 7.5, but I'm just saying I think upside is 8 wins and being mostly competitive on most Sundays,
And
because they're not going to play on Thursdays or Mondays. So.
And we can do a whole episode next week if you guys want on the concept of failed picks versus utile picks. Like we could do 25 minutes on if Marcus Mariota was a failed pick, because by the definition we're using of number 2 pick was never a top 10 quarterback at his position.
I will die, and on my headstone it'll say Marcus Mariota wasn't a bust.
Yeah. And that's like, we can do a lot of time on this. It's a very convoluted conversation, but
the greatest improvement in win total in the history of the organization, playoff games, winning franchise. That's all under the watch and leadership of Marcus Mariota. And then he got hurt, and it's a bummer it didn't work out after that.
So this is not me saying that there is a right answer, by the way. If you think he was a failed pick, it's probably right. If you think he wasn't a failed pick, it's probably right. It's a very interesting litmus test of what you expect out of a player and what you expect out of an entire organization and whether one player can turn around an organization and all of this stuff. It's very fascinating. And Cam will always be a lightning rod because of the position he was picked in. We are running up on time, and I'm sure
it is
Braden
a
wants
fact.
Stuff to do with the rest of his life.
It's a fact that Marcus Mariota wasn't a bust. And that Marcus Mariota wasn't a failed pick. It wasn't what people wanted it to be, but it is a fact that he wasn't a failed pick. We will spend an hour on it next week. Or maybe a couple of weeks from now.
I will be at the beach, so I'll be like sipping drinks while I'm doing it, but I'll do it with you. I'll talk about it.
All right, I'll just get Stillman to come in and argue about it with me.
No, like seriously, if you want me to be a little bit tipsy on a football show, I will do it.
So football show after hours, like 3 p.m. kind of deal.
A football mojito show.
That's right. Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure you fill out the Press Forward survey linked in the show notes. Make sure you subscribe for good journalism at Tennessean.com. Make sure you buy good local craft beer at Sinkers Beverages for your USA watch party tonight and all the other great World Cup matches you got coming up this weekend. Thank you guys all for hanging out and listening. It's always wonderful to interact with you guys in the comments, and you guys were great today, so really appreciate you all. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. For Nick, I'm Braden. We'll talk to you next time. Peace and love.